Mansion was the launch title for the Nintendo GameCube. It aimed to show the world what Nintendo's new shiny box could do. Too bad I was only 57 days old at the time. With my ongoing pursuit to catch up with the console library that seems the most appealing to me, the GameCube's, for its massive improvements and statements on genres for the third dimension, its passionate creations to every single one of those genres and beautiful, crisp 3D models. After covering Melee and Wario World, I think the third piece of the adventure is going to be Luigi's Mansion, and just in time for Halloween, and if I finish the video on time, also for the 3DS re-released. And before we begin, disclaimer. All of this is being recorded on an emulator. The GameCube just never came out in Israel, I never had access to it, so this is being played on a Nintendo Switch Pro controller with an emulator. I don't have any resources to do anything better. Sorry, let's begin. The game begins with Luigi coming terrified yet confident towards the mansion. After a welcoming encounter with the fourth kind, he wakes up in the lab of Professor Egad, where he received the key to the game, the Poltergust 3000. It's a vacuum cleaner. It's like the Ghostbuster idea where they suck up the ghosts and then need to dispose of some or safe. I remember as a kid I used to watch, I guess it was Danny Phantom, but I remember it being something else, whatever, where one of the coolest bits I loved was storing the ghost using the canister and the dangers of opening it. The game doesn't actually have that, you capture a ghost and it's done, but I just really like ghosts. They're my favorite type of supernatural threat, something about the fact that they're both powerless and super powerful at comedic inconsistency is just so endearing, yet still contains the spooky aspect it needs. Back to the vacuum cleaner, I think it's one of the most brilliant game design ideas Nintendo ever made in the modern era. Back in NES days, they just published every second idea they had that could work. Some wacky bike game? Sure. A Breakout clone where you control two giant paddles to climb a mountain? Sure, make it a chain grab too, whatever. But a modern, lengthy experience with a plotline, progress, characters and polish needs more than the base code, which is why it's shocking to see Luigi's Mansion not just existing, but being presented as a launch title. The vacuum mechanic is all the game is based on. You use it to check for traps, enemies, coins, hearts, clearing dust piles, pulling carpets, blinds, tablecloths and posters, and while these examples may not vary that much, they feel new. The fact no video game I ever played required me to think about what fabric is around me, what can be sucked by a vacuum cleaner, and what do I need to do with a candle is what makes the experience unique. Now, if the whole game was just running around and just sucking things up with and no adding other factors, the game would have gotten stale, quick. The game changes that by making the ghosts require an extra bit of effort every time, the flashlight. Ghosts are not affected by the poltergust until you reveal their heart. To do that, you mainly need to scare them with the flashlight, and then very quickly start vacuuming. They run away pretty fast and you have to wait for them to respawn if you just stun them and don't react, so even if this is just one extra button before sucking them up, you always need a sharp reaction for efficient ghost capturing. The game's structure is great in my opinion. The entire game works on keys to unlock new doors in the single mansion, making it possible to backtrack to whichever room you really want, while not letting you just walk around freely. The structure is very firm, and besides some points I personally didn't understand what to do in, and we'll get to those later, the pacing of the game is very good as long as you can keep focus on what to do. Because there's plenty consequences to getting lost in the game is a very real experience. You strongly feel scared and rush from room to room in order to find where you're supposed to go. I remember during my playthrough I died once in a room and delayed coming back there enough, so much so that I forgot to come back and spent a good 20 or more minutes running around doing nothing, checking every single room, but there was value to it. After every single room you clear, the lights turn on, and when that happens, the Boogs take positions. I personally always found it weird that there's like a separation between Boogs and ghosts, and also like the Eries from Mario World, which is another game I want to cover on the channel. I should do that. I don't know, there's a lot of weird species specifications in the Mario universe, probably because most of it is just building off of things and then trying to fit them all at once eventually. Doesn't quite stack up, but I guess it makes for an interesting lore. Regardless, when the lights turn on, you need to play a game of hot and cold around different objects in the room you can knock and push around a bit. Once you find the boo, it's just straight vacuuming. But the thing is that every single room in a mansion holds at least one of those boos, meaning if you want to get all 50 boos, like the checklist wants you to do at the bottom of the screen, you need to get back through every single room you already played. Luckily, this mechanic takes action only after the first good 12 or 14 rooms, and you have a very helpful map to tell you exactly what room you have been through or not. It doesn't say what you accomplished in the room, meaning you'll have to know for yourself if you got the boo or not, but that wasn't really an issue for me when I played. Again, the linear design with shortcuts opening up slowly is helpful in many ways. It's not a maze of a mansion, it's actually very few branching paths that aren't just one or two connected rooms. One issue with the boos is that the last few boos of the 50 will be so scared of Luigi's reputation of ghost mischief, they'll exit the room sometimes and you have to go to the room past the walls they exited from to catch them again. This would have been a fun twist if the result wasn't this. Oh, I'm showing the full clip. I need to prove this point. You can skip to this point if you want, but yeah. We're showing it all, baby. Still egging on. I know there's a trick. I started watching a speedrun lately after I beat the game of the 100%, and it's really entertaining, I have to say. But there's a trick that I did not know where you gotta tap, but I was not aware of that. We're showing the full clip yet again. I'm gonna state this again because content. Imagine going through this in 2001, huh? Imagine going through this when you're 57 days old, eh? Yeah. Great. Oh, gotta get the coins, of course. I'm also commenting on what I'm saying. Again, this is good. 5. Oh, got it. 2 HP. Great. Very entertaining. Oh wow, that's new. Oh well, that isn't. Come on, inching ever closer. Hopefully you fast forwarded. If not, well, thank you for egging along. With a capital egg. Yep, there it is. Yep, perfectly. That's what I wanted. Yep, and there it is. Perfect, 1 HP. This is why I play video games for a living. I don't make money out of this. Enough, that's at least for sure. Ah, phenomenal. 1 HP, yep. Glad you enjoyed that. Back to the video. Let's go back and talk a bit more about the design of the game just before starting personality. The elements. Starting late chapter 2 out of 4, you will progressively get 3 new ways to use the poltergust. Elemental attacks, being fire, water, and ice. They have their own gauge and they are loaded by collecting an elemental ghost from a source of burning, flow, and frozen things respective to the element, of course. And you can only carry one at a time. I have so much appreciation for not taking a Kirby Star Allies-like approach to these, where in that game, if you need an element for a puzzle or secret, it's always supplied right there on the spot. With Luigi's Mansion, it isn't always clear what you need to do, meaning you actually have to think about what part of your limited toolset you need the most at any point. This leads to excellent and engaging puzzle design for like 97% of goats. I did require a guide for the final boss and this cake guy. Alright, cake guy, time to explain what that even means. It's time to talk about the true driving nature of the narrative and gameplay behind Luigi's Mansion, the Portrait Ghosts. Ooh. The true structure of the game is based on a thing called Portrait Ghosts. The idea is that Professor Egad had all these fellas neatly stored inside paintings until the Boogs stole them and revived the ghost pictures, and those now reside within the mansion. I want to believe the ghosts seemingly come back to where they resided before the afterlife, life. But then Egad claims the mansion only came into existence a few days ago, so I'll assume the rooms were just continued manifestation of each portrait ghost. Useless lore aside, each portrait ghost is pretty much a mini-boss for itself, but that title isn't really doing it justice. It's not just a big enemy that stops the screen from scrolling or whatever. Each of these have their own personality and design, and the way you get each one to be vulnerable to the poltergeist is a mystery, and all you have to direct you is what's inside the room and what the Game Boy horror screen tells you about the ghosts. I haven't mentioned it yet, but it's a fairly simple concept. Luigi has this first-person style camera available that, when pointed at things of interest or hearts of portrait ghosts, shows a bit of dialogue, either by Luigi or in the latter case, a passing thought of the portrait ghosts. It is also used for a bit of interaction with the world. I was surprised to find out that if you use it on a mirror, for example, it's a fast warp to the very entrance of the mansion. It was very, very weird to see for the first time. Just look at these graphics. Whoa, that's graphics. But okay, so after finishing the game, I let myself watch some videos on the game just to see if I missed anything and what are points I might want to address that others didn't. And a main thing I noticed is people really loving the Game Boy horror and how much it expands on the game. But I don't see it. I simply don't. It feels very video gamey compared to the rest of the experience, because when using the vacuum cleaner is so unique to a video game that whenever I use this camera that spits out a statement, it's the usual single static dialogue or a repeated text that just reminds you that nothing you see is real and truly has infinite outcomes. Besides the repeated dialogue, the portrait ghosts actually give pretty poor hints as to what to do, but you kinda just figure it out anyway. Like, what am I supposed to understand from this dialogue alone? Usually confusing ghost thoughts are what got me stuck in loops, because I didn't know what to do. It's pretty on the line as far as hints go sometimes. Besides that, the fact that the ghosts all have their own rooms with unique models, textures, and assets are nothing short of astounding for a GameCube game. This was still the era where if you made a model, you better reuse it often when you can, just to save on space. The portrait ghosts weren't part of Luigi's Mansion 2, as I've heard, which really makes me hope that the Switch game was recently announced at the time of this video has them again. They were the main component that moved the story, the player, and the progress forward. I think this was a way of spacing the game as a, how do I say it, the mini boss rush? Mini boss rush? I don't know. I think the way of spacing it like that is genius and handled really well with the non-combat themed presentation. And speaking of ghost themes, I have to talk about the sound design because, ooh, it's good. While the mansion is constantly playing the ghastly main theme, the mini-bosses feature a more synthesized yet still natural vibe. Well, supernatural, but not a computery vibe. Catch what that means. The reason the constant repeat of the mansion's theme isn't repetitive is because instead of just being a loop, it's more of like a breathing cycle for Luigi. He hums along and stops when he is actively doing something else, and after getting a bit carried away, he kind of scares himself by the imaginary band playing along with him and has to repace himself back. Just listen. It's very charming, and honestly it doesn't get old, especially considering how long the game is. Yeah, it's time for that. I think the game is very well lengthed. It's shorter than your usual Mario or just any single player experience, but my own playthrough took roughly, well, like Don't really estimate, but best I can say is 6 to 10 hours. All this combined with the fact that for all of those roughly 8 hours of gameplay, I was always hooked, always enchanted by the game's atmosphere and never tired of any concept. I think the game stays for a perfect length for it to not be repetitive in any way. I really have no criticisms of this game. I can review Mario 64 and say the controls don't really hold up the test of time because I have modern equivalents to compare it to. And I can like say Melee feels good, but kind of weird when you just start playing it for the first time because I have things to compare it. But the vacuum adventure genre isn't that populated, and for someone who doesn't play horror games, I really have nothing to try and distinguish this game from. That maybe Portal, I don't know, it's another game where you use a thing that lets you interact with the world in a unique way, but that's still so wide, you know? Like, that I think what solidifies Luigi's Mansion as a masterpiece is its unique approach, and that's all I have to say. Which is very surprising to me. I wanted to dedicate a lot of time to play the whole game in my holiday break. I enjoyed it. I expected to have a lot of things to say, but while the length of the game is good, it did surprise me in a debatably not very positive way. And while it does have its infuriating moments and with the booze and some misdirection with the ghost dialogue, besides those two minor hiccups, I can wholeheartedly recommend you play this masterpiece and just don't feel bad for looking up a guide or something. Luigi's Mansion for the GameCube gets a 5 out of 5 from me for being a unique, charming, and beautifully executed adventure. Thank you for watching. I love you. Goodbye.